Happy learning. In this video lecture, we are going to discuss method overloading in Java. So what is method overloading? What do you mean by overloading? In Java, we have a concept called method overloading. So Java supports polymorphism because Java is an object-oriented programming language. So one of the concept of object-oriented programming language is polymorphism. Polymorphism is a concept of object-oriented programming. So what do you mean by polymorphism? So we can divide this sentence, that word, into two things. One is poly, another one is morphism. Poly means many, morphism means form. So it will take many forms. It will take many forms. That means multiple forms. So how will you achieve polymorphism in Java? There are two types of polymorphism. One is static polymorphism, another one is dynamic polymorphism. So static polymorphism, in the sense, we can call it as compile time binding or early binding. So static polymorphism. So binding will happen at the time of compilation. Then another one is dynamic polymorphism. We call it as runtime binding or late binding. So during runtime, it will bind. Binding of method call to its definition happens at runtime. If it is static polymorphism, binding of method call to its definition happens at compile time. So compile time polymorphism or static polymorphism. How will you achieve static polymorphism in Java? With the help of method overloading. Method overloading is one of the ways through which Java supports polymorphism. So static polymorphism. How will you achieve static polymorphism in Java? With the help of method overloading. So what is method overloading? Method overloading. Multiple methods can have the same name with different parameters in the same class. So multiple methods can have the same name with different parameters. So instead of defining two methods that should do the same thing, it is better to overload one. Method overloading is achieved by either overloading by changing the number of parameters, method overloading by changing the data type of parameters. So now we will discuss this method overloading. So method overloading, multiple forms. That means first one is the number of parameters. First we should know how to create a simple method in Java. So how to create simple method in Java? I'm using online compiler. So we have a class called demo overload. Inside that I have main method. So I have system.out.println to display demo overloading. If I run this program, execute this program, it will display demo overloading. Now I am going to create one method. So simple method. So to add two numbers. Now I am going to add two numbers. How to create method in Java? So void add method. Okay. Add. So I am going to add two numbers. So I am going to assign some value, int a, then int b, int a and int b, two variables. Then here I am going to display those two variables. So I am going to display these two variables. So system.out.println a and b. Okay, I am going to display a, then I am going to display b. This is the simple method. I am I have one method called add method. I have two variables A and B. So I am going to assign some value. A is equal to 10, B is equal to 10. I am going to display both the values. Then if you want to add these two values, then you can add these two values. C is equal to A plus B. Then you can display both the values and then result. System.out.println of result. Addition. Okay. Now directly we can give A plus B here, or otherwise we can give C. I'm going to display the result. Now after defining that method, I have to create object and then I have to call that particular method. So what is the name of the class? Demo overload. So I am going to create object for demo overload. obj1, object name is obj1, new demo overload. Okay, so I have created object demo overload. After creating object, I am going to call that particular method, add method, obj1.add. Okay, so if you execute this program, get the result. Because I have a method called add method, I have two variables A and B. I have already assigned values 10 and 10. Then I am going to add these two values. I am displaying that one. This is simple method. Then what do you mean by method overloading? Method overloading in the sense, method having same name, This is add method, but different parameters. So I can have add method with int data type, int. So one without argument, then another one is with integer argument, then another one is with two arguments. So I can have same name but different parameters. Okay, different parameters. So this is example for method overloading. I have one method having the same name but different parameters. That means number of parameters. It can differ with number of parameters. Here method with no argument. This one is method with single argument. Then this one is method with two arguments. So based on number of arguments. So this is one way. First one is add, then second one is so method having the same name with different arguments. This is one thing. You can perform method overloading. So the same thing we are going to implement here. So I have add method. Then another one, what I am going to do, I am going to have one more method with the same name. Here, if you are trying to give the same name, see, I'm going to give one more method, void add then I can have system.out.println. So here this is second method. Okay, one argument. Method with one argument. Here I am going to pass integer. So I am going to pass integer some value a. So while calling that method, obj1 dot add of some values 20 or 30. I am going to pass value 30. Here I can give some other variable s, okay, or number one. Here I am going to display that value number one. Okay. Number one. This is called method overloading. Method having the same name. Here we have two methods in the same class. Method overloading in the sense method having the same name but different arguments on the same class. Here add method, this is another add method. This add method without argument, this add method with single argument, that is integer argument. So if you run this program, we are getting result addition, then 20. Then next one is we are calling object1.add with single argument. It is calling this method one argument number one. If you want to have one more method with the same thing, see, I have given here. Here I am going to pass two arguments, number 2. So here number 1 and again I can display number 2. Number 1 and number 2. Number 2. You can give number 1 also because this is local to this. So number 1, number 2 and number 3. Okay. Now if I am going to call this method, already I have defined. Now we have three methods with the same name, add. First method without argument, second method single argument, third method with two arguments, two parameters. So number of parameters can differ. Now if you run this program, I am getting 10, 10, 20 result, one argument 30. But this one is not displaying. Why? Because we didn't call that method. Only we have defined. So I am going to call that method object1 dot add with two values 40, 50. If you execute this program, so we are getting, first it will call the first method, then without argument, second method with single argument, third method with two arguments. So same method, static polymorphism, this is called static polymorphism. Number of parameters. Here number of parameters are different. Data types of parameters. Data types of parameters here. Now I can have int number 1 and number 2. Here I can pass some value, number int a, then int b. Okay, int a and int b, this argument. Then second one is I am going to give float number 1, float number 2. Here I can have one more variable instead of int and float. Here I am going to pass two values, integer value. While passing two value, integer value, it will call 20, 20, the first method. Then if I am going to call float 30.0, 40.0, it will call the second method. Third one is int and float. So 40 and 50.0 depends on the data type. So data type, then order of data type. Here first one is while calling add with two integer, it will call this method int two methods. Then if you call add method with two floating point number, then it will call this method. So during compilation, this method will be binded with this particular method having two floating point argument. Then this one is one integer, another one is float. If you execute, if you run this program, then you will get number 1 and here number 2 and number 3 will display. Here number 1 and number 2. Otherwise we can add these two numbers and then we can display. So number 2. Number 2. It will display two numbers. So this is example for data types of parameters. Data types of parameters. Here we are getting some object1.add. This is floating point number. This is floating point number 30.4. This is integer. Then this one is double. Double and here also double. Double. Because 30.0, this is double data type. So if you change this as double, then it is working. 40 result, then one argument, this is two argument, but here all are two arguments only. But data types are different. The order of data type, that is also here int, double, then int double. Suppose one more, if you want to add one more method, this is also same, int, double. If you are executing this method, it will give you error. It will give you error because method add int double is already defined. We have the same method add int number, int and double, two values, int and double. So if you change the order, first one is double, second one is integer. First one is double, second one is integer. While calling object1 add 40 50.0, that means it will call add method of integer and double. Now this program will execute. It will give you error, but it will not call this method. Why? Because we didn't call explicitly. So now I am going to call object1 dot add. First one is double. So I can give 50.0. The next one is 20. Now it will call this method. Add with two arguments. But first value parameter is double. Second one is integer. When you execute this, 20, 50.0. This is sequence of data types. That also you can change. So you can do method overloading with number of parameters with single argument, two argument, three arguments. Then you can change the data types of parameters. You can have two arguments, all the methods, but data types are different. Int, here double, then int double. Then third one is sequence of data type parameters. That means sequence, here integer double, this one is double and integer. But invalid method overloading in the sense, here I have return type void. Okay. So we can have one more method. Suppose if you want to have one more method, the same method, void add. Here I am going to change the return type, int. Then I am going to give return 0. Okay, return 0. Now both the methods are same data type, two arguments, integer. Here I have changed the return type. If you are changing return type, this is invalid method overloading. It will not overload even though if it is different. Method add is already defined in class demo overload. If you are changing the return type. That is not valid method overloading. It is not possible. So you cannot change the return type. If you are changing return type, it will not overload that particular method, even though if the method name is same parameters but different data type, return type, it is not possible. That is not method overloading. Then when overloading by changing the number of parameters, then method overloading by changing the data types of parameters. So only change the return type of method is not method overloading. There must be differences in the number of parameters. So Java supports method overloading and always occurs in the same class. Not like method overriding. Overriding in the sense different class. So that is another concept. We call it as dynamic polymorphism. Overriding is dynamic polymorphism. So here, so if you want to know about more about methods, then you can visit this YouTube link.